Imagine waking on a Saturday morning in 1967 and feeling not relief, but a quiet, inevitable dread. Because Saturday wasn't the weekend as we know it today. It wasn't Netflix and leisurely brunches and perhaps a bit of light tidying. No, Saturday was work. Real, backbreaking, all-consuming work. The house smelled of vim and carbolic soap, and somewhere in the distance you could hear the rhythmic thump of a carpet beater against fabric, or the scrape of a brush on stone. The weekend wasn't freedom. It was a battleground against dust, coal soot, and the sheer relentless grime of ordinary life. Today we're going to step back into those Saturday mornings, those Sunday afternoons, and rediscover 15 household chores from the 60s and 70s that didn't just fill our weekends, they defined them. Number 15. Scrubbing the front step. Every Saturday morning, without fail, you'd see them. Women up and down every street, on their knees, bucket beside them, scrubbing brush in hand, attacking the front step as though their very honor depended upon it. And in a way, it did. The front step was the face you showed to the world, the threshold between your private life and the judgment of your neighbors. You'd scrub it with a stiff bristled brush, using donkey stone, a pale sandy block that you'd rub into the step to leave it gleaming and pale. The water in the bucket would turn gray almost instantly, thick with the week's worth of coal dust, factory soot, and city grime. Your knees ached against the cold stone, your hands were raw from the bristles and the caustic cleaning solutions. But when you stood up, when you looked at that step, clean and proud, and declaring to everyone who passed that this was a respectable home, there was a satisfaction in it, a strange, painful pride. Today the idea seems almost medieval. We barely notice our front steps. We certainly don't scrub them on our hands and knees. Most of us wouldn't even know where to buy donkey stone. But back then, a dirty front step was a statement. It said you'd let standards slip. It said you didn't care. And in the close-knit communities of post-war Britain, that was unthinkable. Number 14. Making the coal fires. If you lived through the 60s and early 70s in Britain, you knew the ritual intimately. Before central heating became widespread, keeping the house warm was a daily task, and on weekends it was an art form. You'd start with yesterday's ashes, still faintly warm, scooping them out with a small shovel into a metal bucket. The dust would rise, coating your hands, your clothes, settling in your lungs. Then came the laying of the fire, screwed up newspaper at the bottom, kindling wood arranged in a careful pyramid, then the coal piece by black, shining piece, positioned just so. You'd strike a match, hold it to the paper, and pray it would catch. Sometimes it roared to life. Sometimes it smoldered and died, and you'd have to start again. The smell was unmistakable. Coal smoke, sharp and acrid, mingling with burning paper. It clung to everything. Your hair, your clothes, the curtains, the wallpaper. In winter, you'd spend your entire weekend feeding the fire, keeping it alive, because letting it die meant starting from scratch. And starting from scratch meant an hour of cold misery. Today, we flick a switch. The heating comes on. We don't think about it. We certainly don't spend our Saturday mornings on our knees building fires from ash and hope. But back then, warmth wasn't automatic. It was earned, piece by piece, bucket by bucket, throughout the long, cold weekend. Number 13. Polishing the furniture with beeswax. There was a particular smell that belonged to Sunday afternoons. Sweet, warm, slightly floral. The smell of beeswax polish being worked into wood. Every piece of furniture in the house, every sideboard, every table, every wooden chair back, would be polished religiously. You'd take a tin of Mansion House polish, or perhaps a pot of Mr. Sheen, though the purists stuck with proper beeswax, and you'd work it into the wood with a soft cloth, using small circular motions. It wasn't quick. A dining table could take 20 minutes, working the wax in until the wood seemed to drink it, then buffing it to a deep glowing shine with a clean cloth. Your arms ached. The repetitive motion became almost meditative. But when you finished, when you stood back and saw the wood gleaming, reflecting the light like still water, there was a deep satisfaction in it. The furniture wasn't just clean, it was cared for, loved, maintained. Today, most of our furniture is flat-pack particle board with a laminate finish. You can't polish it. You wipe it down with a damp cloth if it gets sticky. The ritual of polishing, that slow, careful maintenance, has disappeared entirely. We've gained convenience, certainly, but we've lost that connection, that sense of stewardship, the feeling that the objects in our homes were worth the time and effort to preserve. Number 12. The weekly wash with the twin tub machine. Monday was wash day, but if Monday had been rained out, or if you worked during the week, then Saturday became wash day, and wash day was an all-day affair. The twin tub washing machine, if you were lucky enough to have one by the late 60s, sat like a squat, white sentinel in the kitchen or the scullery. It had two drums, one for washing, one for spinning. You'd fill the washing drum with hot water from the kettle, or from a hose attached to the kitchen tap, add Persil or Daz washing powder, and load in the clothes. The machine would agitate them, thrashing them about in the soapy water for 10-15 minutes. Then came the hard part. You'd fish each item out with wooden tongs, dripping and heavy, and feed it through the mangle, the wringer, two rubber rollers that squeezed the water out with terrifying efficiency. More than one woman caught her fingers in those rollers. Then you'd transfer the clothes to the spinner, a drum that whirled at tremendous speed, pressing you back if you leaned too close, extracting the remaining water with centrifugal force. After that, everything went on the line, outside if the weather held, or inside on a wooden drying rack if it didn't, filling the house with damp, clean-smelling air. The whole process took hours. It was back-breaking, repetitive, exhausting. Today, we load the washing machine, press a button, and walk away. We come back 2 hours later to dry clean clothes. We barely think about it. But back then, clean clothes were an achievement, a weekend conquered, a battle won against grime and sweat, and the endless, relentless dirt of ordinary life. Number 11. Hanging out the washing, come rain or shine. Once the clothes had been through the twin tub, or if you were still using a copper boiler and a washboard, still hand-wringing everything, they had to dry. And drying meant the washing line. Every back garden, every yard, had one. 2 metal posts with a rope strung between them, or sometimes a rotary line, a metal pole with 4 arms spinning like a skeletal carousel. You'd take the wet washing out in a wicker basket, pegs in a cloth peg bag pinned to your apron, and you'd hang each item carefully, sheets billowing like sails, trousers pegged at the waistband, socks paired and hung by their toes. It was an art, and there were rules. You hung whites in the sun, if possible, to bleach them brighter. You didn't hang smalls, your undergarments, where the neighbors could see them too clearly. And you prayed it wouldn't rain, because if the heavens opened, you'd have to rush outside, tear everything down, and start the drying process all over again, this time indoors on a clothes horse in front of the fire, turning the house into a damp, steaming laundry. The smell of line-dried clothes, though, was incomparable. Fresh air, sunlight, with just a hint of coal smoke from the neighbor's chimney. Today, we have tumble dryers, efficient, quick, convenient. But there's something we've lost, that smell, that satisfaction. The sight of a line of clean washing, dancing in the breeze, announcing to the world that you'd conquered another week. Number 10. Defrosting the freezer. If you had a freezer in the 60s or 70s, and not everyone did, they weren't the frost-free marvels we have today. They were treacherous, icy caves that required regular, brutal maintenance. Ice would build up inside, slowly, inexorably, creeping across the walls, the shelves, the door seal, until the freezer was more ice than storage space. And so every few months you'd have to defrost it. This was a weekend job and a messy one. You'd turn the freezer off, empty everything into a neighbor's freezer if you were lucky, or into a cool box packed with ice if you weren't. Then you'd leave the door open and wait. The ice would melt slowly, dripping into towels you'd placed on the floor, forming puddles that needed constant mopping. If you were impatient, and most people were, you'd try to speed the process along. Some people used hair dryers. Some people, dangerously, used kettles of boiling water. Some people, and this was officially forbidden but widely practiced, would take a knife and try to chip the ice away, risking puncturing the freezer coils and releasing a hiss of refrigerant gas. The whole process could take half a day, and when you were done, when the freezer was clean and dry and switched back on, you'd swear you'd never let it get that bad again. But of course you would. Today, our freezers defrost themselves. We never think about it. We never spend our Saturday afternoon on our knees mopping up freezer water and chipping away at ice. But back then, it was just another weekend chore, another small battle in the endless war to keep the household running. Number 9. Polishing every pair of shoes for the week ahead. Sunday evening after tea, the family would gather in the kitchen or the living room, and out would come the shoe polish box. A wooden or metal box containing tins of cherry blossom or kiwi polish in various shades, brushes, buffing cloths, and dubbin for the leather. Every pair of shoes the family owned would be lined up, and each one would be cleaned, polished, and buffed until it gleamed. School shoes, work shoes, church shoes, all of them. You would apply the polish with a small brush or a cloth, working it into the leather in small circles, paying special attention to scuffs and scratches. Then you'd buff, hard and fast, with a soft cloth or a horsehair brush until the leather shone like glass. It wasn't just about appearance, though that mattered. Polished shoes lasted longer. The polish protected the leather from water, from cracking, from the wear and tear of daily life. And in an era when shoes were expensive, when you might own 2 pairs if you were lucky, making them last was essential. The smell of shoe polish is one of those sense memories that transports you instantly. Waxy, slightly chemical, oddly comforting. Today, most of our shoes don't need polishing. Trainers, canvas pumps, synthetic materials that wipe clean. We've lost the ritual, that Sunday evening gathering, that sense of preparation for the week ahead. We've gained convenience, certainly, but we've lost something, too. That care, that attention, that understanding that the things we owned deserve to be maintained. Number 8. Beating the rugs outside. Fitted carpets weren't universal in the 60s and 70s. Many homes still had rugs laid over bare floorboards or linoleum, and these rugs needed regular, vigorous cleaning. Once a month, sometimes more often in winter, when coal dust was everywhere, you'd take the rugs outside. You'd drape them over the washing line, or over a wall, or over a fence, and then you'd beat them. With a carpet beater, a flat, woven implement that looked like a large, demented tennis racket, you'd thrash the rug again and again and again. Clouds of dust would rise with each blow, billowing out in gray-brown plumes, visible in the sunlight. You'd beat the rug until your arms ached, until no more dust came out, until you were satisfied that you'd extracted every last particle of grime. It was exhausting. It was oddly satisfying. There was something primal about it, something almost violent, taking out the week's frustrations on a defenseless rug. And when you carried it back inside, lighter, cleaner, smelling of fresh air, and laid it back on the floor, the house felt renewed. Today we vacuum, a quick run over the carpet with a Dyson, and we're done in minutes. We don't haul rugs outside. We don't beat them until dust clouds fill the air. We've saved ourselves the labor, certainly, but we've lost the theater of it, the spectacle, the sight of every house on the street with rugs hanging over walls, the sound of carpet beaters creating a strange, domestic percussion section on Saturday mornings. Number 7. Ironing the bed sheets. Today, if we iron at all, it's clothes for work, perhaps a special outfit. But in the 60s and 70s, everything was ironed, everything, including bed sheets. Fresh off the washing line, bed sheets would be sprinkled with water from a bottle with a perforated metal cap, or rolled up damp in a towel overnight to keep them from drying completely, because damp linen ironed more easily. Then you'd set up the ironing board, heat the iron on the gas cooker if you still had a flat iron, or plug in the electric iron if you'd moved with the times, and you'd begin. Sheets were enormous, unwieldy things. You'd iron one half, then the other, trying to avoid creating new creases as you worked. The iron was heavy. Your arm ached. The repetitive motion, back and forth, became hypnotic. But when you were done, when you made the bed with those perfectly pressed sheets, sliding between them at night was a luxury. They were crisp, smooth, cool against your skin, carrying the faint scent of lavender water or starch. Today we pull sheets from the dryer, fold them if we're feeling organized, shove them in the airing cupboard if we're not, and put them straight on the bed. Ironing sheets seems not just unnecessary, but faintly mad. Who has the time? Who has the energy? But back then, time was structured differently. Weekends were for housework, and properly cared for sheets, pressed and folded with hospital corners, were a mark of a well-run home, a source of quiet pride. Number 6. Starching the collars and the doilies. Starch isn't something most people think about anymore, but in the 60s and 70s, it was essential. Shirt collars, tablecloths, antimacassars, those little lace doilies that protected chair backs and armrests from hair oil, all of them required starch to keep them stiff and crisp. You'd mix the starch powder, robin or drepak, with warm water, creating a thick, slightly gloopy liquid. Then you'd dip the collars or the doilies into the mixture, squeeze out the excess, and hang them to dry. Once dry, you'd iron them, and the starch would set, creating that characteristic stiffness, that crisp, formal texture. It wasn't comfortable particularly. A heavily starched collar could chafe, but it looked proper. It looked respectable. And in an era when appearance mattered enormously, when your collar and your cuffs were scrutinized by employers, by neighbors, by potential in-laws, that stiffness was armor. Today, we buy non-iron shirts. We don't use doilies. We don't know what an antimacassar is, let alone why we'd starch one. We've embraced comfort, informality, ease. But we've lost that formality, that sense of occasion, the feeling that even at home, even on a Sunday, you maintain standards. Number 5. Blackleading the cooking range or the fireplace. If you had an old-fashioned cooking range, a cast-iron beast that dominated the kitchen, or if you had a decorative cast-iron fireplace, they required blackleading. This was a weekly chore, sometimes more often, and it was hard, dirty work. Blacklead, also called great polish, came in a block or a tin, a thick black paste that smelled of graphite and oil. You'd apply it with a brush or a cloth, covering every inch of the cast iron, working it into the crevices and the decorative moldings. Your hands would turn black. The dust would get in your nose, your lungs. Then you'd buff it hard with a dry cloth or a stiff brush until the iron gleamed with a deep, silky black shine. It wasn't just decorative, though the shine was satisfying. The black lead protected the iron from rust, from the moisture and heat that would otherwise corrode it. But it was a miserable job, grimy and repetitive, one of those tasks you'd put off until you couldn't ignore it any longer, until the range looked dull and neglected. Today we don't have ranges. We have electric cookers, gas hobs, sleek and modern. We don't blacklead anything. We wipe down the surfaces with a damp cloth, and that's that. We've saved ourselves hours of labor, certainly. But we've lost the connection to those objects, the understanding that they required care, that they repaid effort with longevity and beauty. Number 4. Boiling the nappies. Before disposable nappies became widespread in the late 70s and early 80s, cloth nappies were the only option. And cloth nappies, once soiled, required serious cleaning. They couldn't just go in the wash with everything else. They had to be boiled. You'd have a large metal bucket, sometimes called a nappy bucket, filled with cold water and a disinfectant like Napacin or Milton. The soiled nappies would soak in there throughout the week, creating a smell that is genuinely indescribable, something between antiseptic and decay. Then, on wash day, you'd transfer them to a copper boiler, a large metal tub set over a gas flame, or later, to a dedicated nappy boiler, an electric device designed specifically for this purpose. The nappies would boil for an hour, sometimes longer, sterilizing them, whitening them, removing the stains and the smell. The kitchen would fill with steam, hot and damp, condensation running down the windows, and when you fished them out with wooden tongs, they were scalding hot, clean, but still needing to go through the twin tub to be rinsed and spun and hung out to dry. It was a monumental task, repeated every week, sometimes twice a week if you had more than one child in nappies. Today, disposable nappies go in the bin. We don't boil anything. We don't sterilize. We've traded convenience for environmental impact, certainly, but the sheer labor we've saved is immeasurable. No modern parent spends their Saturday boiling nappies. But back then, it was just what you did. It was part of the unrelenting workload of keeping a household running, a task that fell almost exclusively to women, and one that consumed entire weekends. Number 3, washing the windows with vinegar and newspaper. Clean windows were a point of pride. Smeared, grimy windows were a visible failure, something the neighbors would notice, something that would be commented upon. And so, regularly, often on a Saturday morning when the light was good, you'd wash the windows. Not with proprietary window cleaner, those came later. With vinegar and water mixed in a bucket, and newspaper. You'd dip a cloth in the vinegar solution and wipe down the glass, removing the coal soot, the city grime, the smears from rain and condensation. Then you'd take a sheet of newspaper, crumpled into a ball, and you'd polish the glass in firm, circular motions. The newspaper absorbed the moisture, left the glass streak-free, and the slight roughness of the newsprint seemed to make the windows sparkle. Your fingers would turn black from the newsprint ink. The smell of vinegar was sharp and pervasive, but when you finished, when you stepped back and saw the windows gleaming, the house looked transformed. Light poured in. The world outside seemed brighter. Today we use Windowline, or we pay someone to do it for us. We certainly don't use newspaper, not least because we don't have newspapers in the house anymore. We've gained convenience, certainly. But we've lost that satisfaction, that sense of visible achievement, the feeling that you'd made the house shine with nothing more than vinegar and old newspaper and your own effort. Number 2, cleaning out the pantry and the larder. Before widespread refrigeration, food was stored in the pantry or the larder, a cool, usually north-facing room or cupboard, and these spaces required regular, thorough cleaning. Once a month, or more often in summer, you'd empty the entire pantry, every tin, every jar, every packet, out onto the kitchen table. Then you'd scrub the shelves with hot, soapy water, checking for crumbs, for weevils, for any sign of mice or moths. You'd wipe down every tin, checking the dates, throwing away anything that had gone off. Flour and sugar were stored in large ceramic jars, and these would be emptied, washed, dried thoroughly, and refilled. It was a methodical, time-consuming task, but essential. Without it, pests would take over, food would spoil, waste would mount. And in an era when food was expensive, when rationing was a recent memory, waste was unthinkable. Today we have fridges, freezers, cupboards full of packaged goods with long shelf lives. We don't have pantries, not in the traditional sense. We don't spend our weekends emptying cupboards and scrubbing shelves and checking for weevils. We throw away food with barely a thought, something that would have horrified our grandparents. We've gained ease, certainly. But we've lost that careful stewardship, that awareness of the value of food, that understanding that keeping it safe and fresh required effort and vigilance. Number 1, the ritual of making the beds with hospital corners. Making a bed today is a quick task. Fitted sheet, flat sheet if you use one, duvet, pillows, done in minutes. But in the 60s and 70s, making a bed was an art form. There were no fitted sheets, not widely. Instead, you used flat sheets, top and bottom, and you made them stay in place using hospital corners, a technique borrowed from nursing, designed to create a smooth, tight, perfectly tucked bed. You'd lay the bottom sheet across the mattress, ensuring equal overhang on both sides. Then, at each corner, you'd lift the edge of the mattress, tuck the sheet under, take the excess hanging down, and fold it into a perfect, neat triangle, then tuck that under, too. When done correctly, the sheet was so tight you could bounce a coin off it. Then came the top sheet, similarly tucked, then the blankets, usually 3 or 4 of them in winter, wool or candlewick, each one tucked with the same precision. Finally, the bedspread, smoothed until there wasn't a wrinkle in sight. The whole process took 10-15 minutes per bed, and you did every bed in the house, every weekend. It was about more than neatness. A properly made bed was warmer, the tight sheets and blankets trapping heat. It was about pride, about demonstrating that you ran a proper household, that you maintained standards. Today we pull the duvet up, perhaps smooth it down if we're feeling organized, and call it done. The idea of spending a quarter of an hour making one bed seems absurd, but back then time was different. Weekends were different. And a well-made bed, corners precise and sheets drum tight, was a small daily victory against chaos and disorder. These weren't just chores. They weren't simply tasks to be completed and forgotten. They were the structure of weekend life, the rhythm that defined Saturday mornings and Sunday afternoons, the texture of ordinary existence in mid-century Britain. They were exhausting, certainly. They were repetitive. They consumed hours, entire days, time we can barely imagine surrendering now. But they also gave shape to time, created a sense of achievement, provided visible, tangible proof that you'd conquered another week, that your home was cared for, that you maintained standards in an uncertain world. We've gained so much in the decades since. Washing machines that do everything for us, central heating that never requires our attention, convenience, ease, free time to fill as we please, but we've lost something too. That connection to our homes, that understanding of the work required to maintain them, the satisfaction that came from physical labor, from visible results, from knowing that the shine on your furniture, the crispness of your sheets, the gleam of your windows came from your own hands, your own effort. These chores were more than housework. They were rituals, small ceremonies that bound communities together, that defined what it meant to keep a proper home, that connected us to generations before us who'd done the same tasks in the same ways. They're gone now, mostly, swept away by technology, by changing values, by the relentless march of progress. But the memory remains, vivid and detailed, a reminder of a world where weekends weren't freedom, but obligation, where leisure was earned, not assumed, where keeping a home was work, real work, that filled your days and defined your worth. A world that's vanished now, leaving behind only echoes and the faint ghostly smell of beeswax polish and coal smoke and vinegar-cleaned windows drifting through the rooms of memory.